On behalf of Venerable Master Jiru and the community of Mid-America Buddhist Association, also known as MABA, we would like to welcome you to an evening with Thanissaro Bhikkhu. We have friends joining us from 20 countries. How wonderful, wonderful, marvelous. We're happy you're here.
So tonight, without going into too much more detail, we're going to invite Thanissaro Bhikkhu again. His meditation on death, or helping us cope with that universal experience.
Okay. Before the talk, I'd like to start with a brief breath meditation. So everyone get a comfortable position, get back straight, hands in your lap, close your eyes. And start with thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill is a wish for happiness, true happiness. Because goodwill aims at true happiness, and true happiness comes from within. Your true happiness doesn't have to conflict with anyone else's. So that's a feeling you can have, you can extend to everybody. When you have goodwill for yourself, it's not selfish. You're going to be developing your own inner resources for finding happiness, the thing you can share with others. So start with that thought. May I be truly happy? May I understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them? And then extend the same thought to others. Start with people who are close to your heart, your family, your very close friends. May they find true happiness too. And then spread those thoughts out in ever-widening circles to people you know well and like. To people you like, even though you don't know them so well. To people you're more neutral about. And to people you don't like. Remember that the world would be a much better place if everyone could find true happiness within. Spread thoughts of goodwill to people you don't even know. And not just people, living beings of all kinds. East, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. Now bring your attention to the breath. Take a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths. Notice where you feel the breathing process in the body. Focus your attention there. And then ask yourself, does long breathing feel good? If it does, you can keep it up. If not, you can change. Try shorter, more shallow, heavier, lighter, faster, slower. Experiment for a while to see what rhythm and texture of breathing feels best for the body right now. If your thoughts wander away from the breath, don't follow them. Just drop the thoughts. You'll be right back at the breath. If it happens 10 times, 100 times, just keep dropping them 10 times, 100 times. Each time you come back to the breath, reward yourself with a breath that feels especially good. Think of the breathing as a whole body process. And which parts of the body could use some good breath energy right now? Any pains in the body, you don't have to focus attention on them. Focus on the parts that you can make comfortable by the way you breathe. Now, as the breath gets comfortable, there is a tendency to leave the breath and go for the comfort, in which case you lose the foundation for your meditation. So the next step is to breathe in and out, aware of the whole body. And a good way to build up to the whole body awareness is to go through the body first, section by section, to familiarize yourself with how the breathing process feels in the different parts of the body. So start down around the navel. Locate that part of the body in your awareness. Watch it for a while as you breathe in, breathe out to see what rhythm and texture of breathing feels good there. Think of the breath as being refreshing, not as a chore. And if there's any tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. So no tension builds up as you breathe in, and you don't hold on to any tension as you breathe out. Then move your attention up to the solar plexus and follow the same steps there. In other words, 1, locate that part of the body in your awareness. 2, watch it for a while as you breathe in, breathe out to see what rhythm of breathing feels good there. And then 3, if there's any sense of tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. Now bring your attention up to the middle of the chest and follow the same steps there. Now bring your attention to the base of the throat and follow the same steps there. Bring your attention to the middle of the head. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy coming in not only through the nose, but also the eyes and the ears. In from the back of the head, down from the top of the head, going deep into the brain. And then as you breathe out, think of the breath energy radiating out from the head in all directions. Working through any patterns of tension you may have around the jaws, back of the neck, the forehead, around the eyes. Gradually dissolving those patterns of tension away. Now bring your attention to the back of the neck, right at the base of the skull. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and then going down the neck, through the shoulders, the arms, the hands, down to the tips of the fingers. And then as you breathe out, think of the energy radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Keeping your attention at the back of the neck. This time as you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there, then going down both sides of the spine, down to the tailbone. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from the entire back into the air. And as you become more sensitive to the back, if you notice that you're holding more tension in one side than the other, allow that side to relax. And see if you can keep it relaxed all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out. Now focus your attention to the tailbone. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and then going down to the hips, the legs, the feet, down to the tips of the toes, spaces between the toes. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Now it completes one cycle in the survey of the body. If you're meditating on your own, you could go through the body as many times as you like at whatever pace you like. Are you ready to settle down? But for the time being, choose one spot in the body that seems most congenial to stay focused. Focus your attention there. And then think of your awareness spreading from that spot to fill the whole body. So you're aware of the whole body breathing in, the whole body breathing out. The range of your awareness may have a tendency to shrink, especially on the out breath. So remind yourself each time you breathe in, whole body. Each time you breathe out, whole body. Allow the breath to find whatever rhythm feels best. Your only duty right now is to maintain the sense of centered but broad awareness. There's nowhere else you have to go, nothing else you have to think about. Just be fully here, right now. This awareness is healing for the body, healing for the mind. Because it's centered and all around at the same time. It's a good foundation for insights to arise. But for the time being, don't worry about the insights. Just make sure this foundation is strong. I invite you to continue meditating. I'll give the talk. You may know the story of the 5 Deva messengers. The old person warns you of aging. The sick person warns you of sickness. And then there are 3 Deva messengers for death. One is a corpse, of course. You see a dead body, and you have to realize that someday your body's going to be dead. But there are 2 others. One is a helpless baby lying on its back. The message being that when you're reborn, you're pretty helpless. You're totally dependent on the kindness of those around you, if you're lucky enough to be a human being. And other levels of being could be worse. And then the other Deva messenger is a prisoner undergoing punishment. There is the possibility after death that if you've done anything really unskillful in this lifetime, you may be punished for it. The message of all of these messengers is that you've got to be heedful, learn how to behave in a way that will lead you to, at the very least, a good rebirth, if possible. And even better, if you can put an end to rebirth altogether, to end these dangers. The whole point of heedfulness is that your actions do make a difference. Most people don't like to think about the issue of death because they feel when death comes, there's nothing you can do about it. You simply have to surrender. But the Buddha pointed out there are choices that are being made at that point. And you want to be in a position where you can make good choices and that good opportunities are available for you to choose. So what the Buddha is basically saying here is that there is a possibility of victory. Instead of being defeated by death, we come out victorious. At the very least, come with a good rebirth where we can continue practicing the Dharma. Even better, we can practice the Dharma all the way, even at that point, and gain total awakening. The sad thing is that there's some Dharma teachers who said questions about what happens after death should be put aside as unknowable or as a mystery. Instead, focus on living the present moment fully in the here and now. You might call this the cult of the here and now. But from Buddha's point of view, that's blind and short-sighted, because our actions will have an impact on not only this lifetime, but also future lifetimes. This is one of the ironies of modern Buddhism, is even though some of the present-day Dharma teachers focus attention on the present moment for its own sake, as a way of avoiding the issue of death, the Buddha taught present moment awareness precisely because of death. You focus your awareness on what the mind is doing in the present moment, because what the mind is doing is going to be preparing you, well or not well, what's going to happen at death. Death could come at any time. That's why you have to focus. We're working right now, and there's work to be done. Work, of course, has to do with the with the duties of the Four Noble Truths. What has you reflect every day, evening at sunset? This could be your last sunset. You might die tonight. Are you ready to go? Are there any qualities in your mind that are likely to get in the way of your going well? If so, work on those qualities right now. Similarly, at sunrise, this could be your last sunrise. Are you ready to go? If not, work on those qualities of mind that you need to work on right now. So what is the work? Part of the work has to do with how the Buddha describes what happens at death. There's one time he was asked, how does a being go from one body to another? The Buddha gave an analogy. He said, just as a house on fire will send flames out, clinging to the wind, which will set another house on fire. In the same way, a being goes for this body by clinging to craving. Now, we all know what craving is like. We might think, well, it might be good. I get to be reborn wherever I crave, but cravings can be totally out of control. The mind is so quick to change direction that the Buddha himself said it was difficult for even him, the master of similes, to think of a simile for how quick the mind can change. So you've really got to be on top of things. You want to train at the very least, the fire goes to a good house. You got good craving and it's going in a good direction. Ideally, of course, you want to go beyond having a rebirth at all. In other words, that means you would have to deconstruct the process of what it means to be a being by deconstructing your cravings and deconstructing your clingings. Notice that the Buddha never says that there is really no being there. A being is created by attachments to the 5 aggregates. And so we're going to have to question our attachments to those aggregates to see where they're unskillful and learn how not to cling to them at all, ultimately. But either way, we're going for a rebirth or we're trying to go beyond rebirth, we have to deal with craving. We don't want the craving to go to a bad place. So at the very least, we have to gain some measure of control over it. This is the first of the two big problems related to that. The Buddha identifies three types of craving. He doesn't define it simply as the desire for things to be different from what they are. He points out three specific types of craving that can lead to what he calls further becoming, i.e. a new life. The first is craving for sensuality. Now, sensuality here doesn't necessarily mean just sensual pleasures. It has to do with our fascination with thinking about sensual pleasures, planning sensual pleasures, fantasizing about sensual pleasures. The mind is much more attached to its fantasies than it is to the actual pleasure. If you watch your mind, you'll see that many things that you say you enjoy, it's because of your fantasizing about them beforehand and afterwards. That, the Buddha says, is where your craving is really attached, which is in the mind's enjoyment of sensual fantasies. The second type of craving is craving for becoming. Now, becoming is basically a sense of identity in a world of experience. Now, these identities can exist either on the purely mental level inside your mind as you're thinking right now, or they can exist, of course, on the outside level. And the Buddha says the two are connected. It's because of these imaginary worlds that come up in the mind, and you take on an identity in that world based on your desire for what you might want to find in that world. So we do this in the mind all the time. You think about, I would like to have this, I'd like to have ice cream, I'd like to have pizza. And then you become the pizza eater, or the potential pizza eater, and then you become the pizza finder. And then you become the person who inside you who's watching both the finder and the eater to see how well they're performing. So there are three senses of self just around one desire. And then, of course, there's the world that's relevant to that desire. In the case of the pizza, it would be the store where you might buy the pizza, or if you have the talent to make a pizza, the place where you can get the ingredients, put them together. And anything that would get in the way of you doing that would also be part of that world. Things that are irrelevant to the quest for pizza would not exist in that particular world, or at least they're overshadowed by what is relevant to your desire. That is called becoming. That's because of these becomings in the mind on the small level that we then move on at death to another becoming on the big level. In the case of all of us right now, we're all here in this human world. We've taken on different identities in this world. We're all on the same level of becoming in that way. And then we'll have to leave this level of becoming. Again, it will become becomings in the mind that will lead us to a new rebirth. As I said, these becomings form around a desire in a particular world of experience. And then we take on identity as relate to that desire. And finally, there's craving for non-becoming. You get into a particular world of experience, you take on a particular identity, and you don't like it. You'd like to destroy it. You'd like to see it annihilated. Those are the three kinds of becoming the Buddha said, three kinds of craving that lead to further becoming. That last one is paradoxical. You would think that desire for non-becoming would get you out of becoming entirely. But when you start thinking in terms of becoming what you are, where you are, and how you'd like to see that annihilated, you latch onto that desire, and that creates a new sense of you in that desire, and that would lead to further becoming. There are states of becoming out there, levels of rebirth, where you basically blank out. Those beings who want to go for annihilation, that's where they tend to go. But they stay there for a while, and then they fall from it, and then they go back to becoming again. So you have a paradox, how to get out of this dilemma. And the Buddha said it's through learning how to take apart the way becoming happens in the mind, in terms of the causal factors that give rise to becoming, the clinging, the craving, sensual contact, name and form, all the factors that depend on co-arising. You see them simply as events, and you develop this passion for them on the level of events. Now we get out. We'll talk about later about how that happens. But notice that there is that dilemma that if you decide I would like to destroy my being right now, you're just going to create another being. So that's one of the issues that we have to deal with as we face death, which is the issue of craving, because it can take us to many different levels of becoming. The other issue, of course, that we have to face is fear of death. Our cravings lead us to want certain things, but then we have a sense of we're powerless to get exactly what we want, and there's a very strong fear around that. The Buddha identified 4 fears related to death. One is fear of the loss of human sensual pleasures. The second is fear of losing your body. The third is fear of punishment for some wrong deeds you may have done in the past. And then the fourth relates to the fact that you really don't know the true Dharma. In other words, you haven't had an experience of awakening, so you don't know what happens after death. It's all a big mystery. This sense of not knowing, ignorance, together with our sense of the fact that our cravings might not be met, that's what gives rise to these fears. Of course, a fear of losing sensual pleasures, of course, is related to our craving for sensuality. Fear of losing the body, fear of punishment are both related to a combination of craving for sensuality and craving for becoming. In case of the body's been a part of our identity. We're afraid to lose it. We don't know what we'll do without it. This is one of the reasons why many people, when they die, they end up just hovering around their bodies. And they can't think of anywhere else to go. Fear of punishment, of course, you want a new becoming, but then you're afraid you're going to get into a becoming that gives you a lot of pain. And finally, ignorance of the true Dharma is related to all three types of craving. In other words, you don't know how your cravings are going to come out, whether you're going to meet with what you want or what you don't want. And so it's because of the craving and the fear that comes from ignorance and weakness, a sense of powerlessness. That's what makes us fear death. So in order to prepare for death, we have to develop strength. The Buddha teaches five types of strength, but there are two different sets of five that are mentioned in the canon. One is conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, discernment. Another list is conviction, a sense of shame, a sense of compunction, persistence, discernment. So you see there's some overlap between the two sets. You put the two together, so instead of having 10 strengths altogether, there are 7. And I'd like to talk about how we use those 7 strengths in order to prepare properly for death. The first one is conviction. You believe in the Buddha's awakening. What he learned about karma is true, that we do have choices, our actions do make a difference, and that they will have an impact on into future lifetimes. So past karma determines what kind of opportunities will be available to us at death. But at the moment of death itself, we will also have some choices. We'll be making choices. We can choose right view or wrong view. And whatever opportunities are available to us at that time, we'll be able to choose among them if we have our wits about us. Which means that there are 2 ways of preparing for death. One is creating good opportunities that will appear to us at death. I myself had a near-death experience. I was electrocuted one time, and I thought I was going to go. And it seemed like a series of doors appeared in front of me, and I could have gone into any one of those doors. Fortunately, the electricity stopped, and I didn't have to choose. But it taught me a lesson. Okay, there are opportunities based on your past karma that will appear to you at that time. So you want to build good opportunities. This is why the Buddha talks about preparing yourself well for future lifetimes by developing 4 qualities. In addition to conviction, he says, you develop virtue, you develop generosity, and you develop discernment and learning how to watch your own mind. And as for how to get some control over what choices you will make at that moment, this is where you have to meditate in order to gain some control over your craving and clinging. So it's good to think about that picture that the Buddha gives of, in his second knowledge of his awakening, of all the many possible levels of rebirth, everywhere from very low levels of hell to very high levels of heaven. But think about it, no matter where you go, it's not permanent. Even the good levels last only for a certain amount of time, and then you fall. And if you haven't prepared yourself properly, you can fall really hard. So this gives you a sense of being very careful about where do you want to go. You want to go to a place where you can actually practice. If you have no choice of it, being able to get out of rebirth totally, choose a place where you can practice and look very carefully at where you might go. Because some places may look good, but they may not necessarily be good places to practice. I'll give you an example. Back in the end of 19th century Thailand, the official line in Bangkok was that the time for Nirvana had passed, the time even for jhana, strong concentration, had passed. Therefore, monks should get themselves involved in education projects, social work projects, that kind of thing. And so if you happen to be born in the palace in Bangkok at that time, your opportunities to practice the Dharma would be severely curtailed. Whereas up in the Northeast, which is the poorest part of Thailand, that's where the forest tradition got started. So at that particular point, what made it look like a good rebirth, and even a palace with lots of wealth, but actually would end up being a bad place to be reborn for the sake of practice. What what might look unpromising, because the Northeast was a place with lots of spirit cults at the time. But it so happened that there were people who were serious about the practice, and they started spreading the word that the practice was still available, still possible. So look carefully when you choose among the various options that come to you at the moment of death. Choose one, make up your mind, I'm going to go where I can practice, whatever the difficulties might be. So once you work with what you started with compunction, you start with conviction, the next strength you want to develop is a sense of shame. And here, we're not talking about the unhealthy sense of shame where you feel that you're a bad person. It's the healthy sense of shame where you feel, okay, I'm a person of high standards, and doing a poor job of dying would be beneath me. Think about all the work that the Buddha did in order to get this teaching available, all the work that many generations of monks and nuns have done to pass the teaching down. And here's my opportunity to take advantage of that teaching. If I don't take advantage of it, it's something to be ashamed of. There are a couple of passages in the canon where they show how a sense of shame can actually be helpful as you think about where you might go. The most famous one, of course, is the one of the Buddhist half-brother, Nanda. Apparently, he ordained somewhat against his will, and he starts missing his old girlfriend. And so the Buddha finds out about this. And so he takes Nanda up to heaven. He shows him the heavenly nymphs up there. And he says, compared to these heavenly nymphs, what does your girlfriend look like? And he says, it looks like she would look like a cauterized monkey with its nose and ears cut off. And the Buddha said, okay, if you practice well, I promise you 500 nymphs in the next lifetime. So Nanda comes back down and starts practicing seriously. Well, the word gets out to the other monks that this is why Nanda is practicing. They start calling him a hireling. You're practicing the Dharma for wages, and your wages is 500 nymphs. He gets really embarrassed. So he starts practicing seriously and actually becomes an arahant. So that's one way in which a sense of shame can actually be helpful on the path. There was another case where this one woman who practiced the precepts and meditated, knew these two monks. And then after all three of them died, she gets to be reborn in the level of one of the devas where it is possible to continue practicing. And she wants to know what happened to the monks. So she goes out, she finds that they're down in the level of the Gandharvas. I don't know if you know about Gandharvas. They're the teenagers of the Deva world. Just like teenagers, they're fascinated with sex, with fast vehicles, and music. And so she goes down and she gives them a piece of her mind. She said, this is horrible. Here you are ordained. And this is what you come here just for sex and fast cars and music. And one of the monks, ex-monks, gets really embarrassed. And so he goes off and meditates and actually improves his level. But the other monk doesn't care. He's enjoying himself too much. So those are two examples of how you can use shame in order to get yourself to practice properly and look for a decent rebirth where you can actually continue practicing. In addition to shame, there's a quality of compunction. A compunction basically means seeing the dangers that come from unskillful behavior. With sense of shame, you're wanting to look good in the eyes of people who have helped you, people who are wise. With compunction, it's more impersonal. You realize, okay, if I act in an unskillful way, it's going to lead to harm. I don't want that. And this is a kind of fear, but it's a fear unlike the other fears of death. This is a fear that comes when you realize I have some power in my ability to choose, and I don't want to misuse that power. Whereas the other four fears of death have to do with fear of powerlessness. This is the fear that comes, I've got a power in my hands, and I want to use it well. The Buddha talks about making sure that you avoid unskillful mind states like greed, ill will, and wrong view. Example of greed was people who want power, and they do everything they can to get power. But then as in the process of getting power, they have to do all sorts of unskillful things. And as a result, they don't want to hear about the Dharma. So the more you look for power, the further and further away you get from the Dharma. So you have to watch out for that. In terms of ill will, the Buddha gives the example of a soldier in battle who is trying to kill the enemy. And it happens to get killed in the midst of his attempts to kill other beings. Okay, the ill will that he has for those other beings will take him to a bad place. Or if he felt that he was justified in doing this was a just war that he was fighting, that would be a wrong view, and that would take him to a bad place too. So you have to be very careful about the mind states that you develop and that you latch onto at the moment of death. So compunction, fear of doing something that would lead to bad consequences, is a good strength to develop. The next strength is persistence, or putting energy in. You realize that the causes of suffering can be traced back to ignorance, and ignorance can be nourished by the hindrances, which are obstacles to concentration and discernment. And so you work on the hindrances, try to abandon them. The hindrances are 5. There's sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and anxiety, and doubt. I'll touch briefly on these. By overcoming these hindrances, you also can overcome 3 of the 4 fears of death. For example, start by overcoming doubt. You try to apply appropriate attention to skillful and unskillful qualities in your mind. You don't tell yourself, I believe, I believe, I believe. That's not going to overcome doubt. It's basically saying, well, the Buddha says, if I act on skillful qualities, there will be good results. If I act on unskillful qualities, there'll be bad results. Test it out in your mind. Try it out. In particular, the Buddha recommends developing thoughts of goodwill and all the other Brahma Viharas, goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. See what impact that has on your decisions. See what impact that has on your life. And you'll overcome your doubts about the Dharma. You begin to see the Buddha's right. If I change my mind, change the qualities of my mind, good things will come about. That's why I'm overcoming the hindrance of doubt. The Buddha also recommends overcoming the hindrance of drowsiness. One thing that's going to be bad as you're dying is you're going to get very sleepy. So you want to make sure that you're not overly drugged at that time. When they give you a painkiller, make sure it's not so much that it puts you to sleep. You want it enough just to take the edge off the pain. You want to try to maintain as much alertness as you can. Overcoming restlessness and anxiety. This is the main emphasis on the Buddha's discussions of how you comfort someone who is dying. He says the worst thing you can do is to die with a sense of worry, because your worries can take you to a bad place. So on the one hand, if you're talking to someone who's dying, say, okay, don't worry about us, don't worry about the people you're leaving behind, we'll be able to take care of ourselves. If that person is worried, though, about things that he or she may have done and the punishment they may get, tell them, okay, it is possible to counteract the effects of those bad actions by developing the determination not to repeat them again, and also to develop right view. You can do that. And then again, spread thoughts of goodwill for yourself so that you don't keep berating yourself, goodwill for others so that you act on kind intentions consistently. So you recognize the wrongdoing, you resolve not to repeat it, you resolve to follow the precepts, and then you develop the Brahma Viharas. That's how you can undercut a lot of restlessness and anxiety. Also, think about the good things you have done in the past, the times when you were generous, the times when you were virtuous and you didn't have to. This is why the book puts a big emphasis on being generous as a voluntary act. We're talking about not so much about Christmas presents and birthday presents, but acts of generosity that are not required of you. And then learn how to think about that, learn how to enjoy the fact that you did that, and that will lift your spirits at the moment of death. As for ill will, of course, that's what you use. You use the Brahma Viharas, particularly the Brahma Vihara of goodwill. And as for sensuality, the Buddha has you look at sensuality as a way that you begin to see its drawbacks. We don't like to look at the drawbacks of sensuality. He gives lots and lots of images, lots and lots of perceptions to use to think about what's wrong with sensuality, all the trouble that it creates. And how you'd be better off if the mind were free from that. Now, the way to overcome attachment to that is to find a pleasure that is better than the sensual pleasures. And this is another reason why we practice concentration, to get a sense of ease and well-being that doesn't have to depend on sensuality at all. So the mind will be more inclined to go in that direction. But particularly at that point of death, you want to counteract any sense of nostalgia, because that again will pull you back to where you wanted to be, which of course has changed in the meantime. I keep thinking about going to the Buddhist holy spots in India and seeing these people who grew up in the Buddhist holy spots and lived all their lives in the Buddhist holy spots, but they were not Buddhist. And so I had no meaning to them, aside from a place where they could make money. So be very careful about thinking, well, I would like to go to this particular place, like to go to that particular place. Those places will change. Or there are people you miss, well, those people are going to change too. So think about that very seriously. You tell yourself, I want to go to a place where I can practice. I want to go to a place that is created by my good actions. Focus on that and don't focus on thoughts of nostalgia. So that's persistence. Then there are the strengths of mindfulness and concentration. As I said, this gives you an alternate place to focus when you're dealing with pain, and also for when you're dealing with thoughts of sensuality. Trying to get yourself out of that matrix, because otherwise the Buddha says this is the mind tends to go back and forth between these two. You go towards pain, you try to escape pain, and you can only think of one thing, which is sensuality. You get to sensuality, it changes on you, turns into pain, and then you go for more sensuality. There's no stop to that. But if you have an alternative sense of pain, and this is what the middle way is all about, we're not going through self-torture, you're not going to sensuality. You're finding a pleasure that is neither. And that will give you a good basis for developing insight at the same time, which is the final strength, discernment. And this is used for destructing narratives of self and views of the world, so that you can get out of that cycle of becoming or trying to destroy states of becoming. As the Buddha said, you learn how to look at the processes that lead up to becoming. There's clinging, which is caused by craving, which is caused by feeling, which is caused by contact, which is caused by the sense media, caused by name and form. Name includes things like intention, attention. You want to see these as just individual events, individual choices in the mind. And as you see them simply on that level, just as individual events, it's like taking a house and looking at the raw material going into the house. And you realize, okay, there's nothing really of any value here, nothing that's not really solid. You're trying to build your house out of straw and grass. It's not going to last. Why bother building another house out of that? Now, just as the Buddha said, your sense of self and the sense of the world are both constructed out of the aggregates and out of the sense media. This is one of the reasons why in the practice of discernment, you're trying to boil things down to just individual events, either the aggregates, individual events in terms of the sense media, and just see them as events arising and passing away. And seeing there's really nothing much there to go for. You can develop a sense of dispassion. That's how you can take apart these narratives that would otherwise would pull you into another state of becoming. And this may sound very abstract, in the sense that you're taking these things and just looking at them as the individual events, but actually they're very intimate. These little events that happen in your mind actually prior to your social sense of self and to your sense of the world. This is one of the reasons why the teachers of all traditions recommend that you meditate as you're dying and see things on these levels. So you can take apart anything that would pull you into identifying either with a state of becoming or identifying with the idea that you're going to get annihilated. Because sometimes at death, when the pain gets really bad, all you think of is, I would just like to be annihilated and be done with this. That's not going to be good to go for. You want to be able to step back from the pain a little bit and say, okay, this is just something arising and passing away. If I latch onto it, there's going to be trouble. If I push it away, there's going to be trouble. Can I just watch it as a series of events? And as you develop that dispassion, the mind can be freed. As the Buddha said, when you learn how to take apart your sense of self-identity, lay people can gain awakening even at the moment of death, to say nothing of monks. This is why when in the canon they talk about the different monks going to see lay people, like the case of Sariputta going to see Anavindiga, and telling him, okay, make sure that my consciousness is not dependent on any of the aggregates, not any of the sense media. Won't have it even dependent on mind consciousness. You know the story. Anavindiga hadn't really been meditating much. He breaks down and cries because he hadn't been taught that before. He says, please from now on, let this be taught to lay people. So here you are, lay people, I'm teaching it to you. Learn how to take things apart. Don't be thinking about the stories where I miss my family, I'm going to miss this, I'm going to miss that, I don't know where I'm going to go. Just try to get the I out of there. Just look at the events happening. This, of course, will require strong mindfulness, strong concentration. But if you had practice in developing these qualities in your regular life, you will have something to bring with you at the moment of death that you can work with. So as you develop dispassion for these processes, the Buddha says what follows on that is you see that they cease. You realize the whole process, the stream of processes, you're not just a passive observer, you are the person who is fabricating these things. There were choices you were making. It's because of your passion that you fabricated these things. If you let go of the passion to do this, things will cease. And then you can give up even your sense of you making them cease. And that way you're freed. Now, some people say, well, I'm afraid I'll be totally annihilated by letting go of these things. But the Buddha reassures you that by letting go, you're actually free. He talks about nirvana as something that is totally satisfying. Always keep that in mind. If you have any wrong view that you go to nirvana, you're going to miss your old friends, or you go to nirvana, you're going to miss this or that pleasure, he says, you've got wrong view. Once you get there, it's just so totally satisfying that there is no sense of lack at all. He talks about 5 attributes of nirvana. One is it is a kind of consciousness. He calls it consciousness without object, or consciousness without surface. The image is of a light beam. The question is, when the sun rises in the morning, there's a house with a window on the east side and a wall on the west side. Where does this light beam land? Well, it lands on the west wall. What if there's no west wall? Well, it lands on the ground. What if there's no ground? In those days, they believed that the ground was supported by water. Well, it's going to land on the water. What if there's no water? It doesn't land anywhere. That's the image for the enlightened consciousness. It's a consciousness that doesn't land on anything. Secondly, it is a truth. In other words, it doesn't change in any way at all. It's outside of space and time. So nothing can touch it, nothing can make it change. Secondly, it is totally blissful. Third is blissful. Fourth is a sense of freedom. There's no sense of location. It's not a world. It's not a place that you would go. You're actually freed from all places, free from all restrictions. That's what the word Nirvana means, basically. Back in those days, they believed that a fire, when it was burning, was clinging to its fuel. Because it clung to its fuel, it was trapped. So the image there is that the fire, when it lets go of the fuel, then it is no longer trapped, and it goes out. In the same way, this consciousness without surface, you don't see it because it's not reflecting off anything, but that doesn't mean it's not there. There's a fire element in the world and throughout all things. In the same way, this fire is totally freed because it lets go. That's the image there. You're not freed. It's not that the aggregates finally let you go. You're the one who lets go and you're freed. And then finally, he says it's excellence. It's the best thing you can imagine, better than you can imagine. So that would be the ideal way to go. If you can't manage the ideal, at the very least, live a life of virtue, generosity, conviction, and discernment. So you create good opportunities so you can continue to practice. Because that's the best aim to hold in mind. If I have to be reborn, may I be reborn in a place where the Dharma is taught and I'm in a position where I can practice it. I may have the inclination to want to practice it. So there's a lot to be done. When death comes, you don't just surrender to it, saying, well, whatever. The Buddha said, if you have your wits about you and you want to practice so that you can have your wits about you, you can actually accomplish great things, even as you're dying. It's in this way that mindfulness of death is not meant to make you discouraged. It's actually meant to encourage you, to rouse you, to realize that there's work to be done and I can do it right now. So right now is the time to do it. And those are my thoughts on the topic. I guess we can stop and wait and open the floor for questions.
Sien Kwan Danyeye, we have 167 people in the room right now. Why don't we take questions via the chat? And we have some already that you have accumulated. Would we like to do that?
Yes, we can start with whatever people have been chatting about first and save those other questions for if we run out of questions. I'm sure that other people have good questions to ask. First, let me thank Ajaan for his talk. I'm so glad to hear some of the things that you've said so coherently, putting all of these things together really in such a short period of time. It's very inspiring. Do you have some questions that people are asking Francesca that you want to start reading?
Yes, and these are the ones we've already gotten from our study group. Ajaan, we have spent the last 2 Sundays during our study group talking about the suttas you suggested or recommended we read and study, and then we moved kind of beyond that. So we have a few questions. Some deaths are traumatic for us. violent deaths, unexpected sudden deaths from illness, death of a child. Are there suggestions from Buddhism as to how to cope with this? And Sien Kwan Danyaye mentions the Kisagotami, mustard seed sutta.
We're talking about the death of other people who are traumatic.
Other people's deaths, people who are close to us.
Okay. Okay, this is one of the things you have to prepare for. That death can come in lots of sudden, very, and pretty gruesome ways sometimes. And so you have to be prepared for that fact. With every relationship, think about the fact that this relationship is going to end someday. And so every day that of your time together, you want to remind yourself, okay, I want to contribute to this relationship in a way so that if it ended suddenly, I wouldn't be left with any bad, regrets dangling, or any things I wish I had said that I never said, or things that I wish I hadn't said that I did say. And so basically the way you conduct your relationship together makes it a lot easier to deal with the traumatic deaths when they come. And then when they do come, say, okay, that we all have our karma, and whatever is born is going to die. I'm not the only person who's suffering from the traumatic death of a loved one. There are many other people out there every day where this is happening. This helps to take away that sense of, well, this is just happening to me. This is totally outrageous. And you realize, well, this is a common feature of the human world. And when you think of those ways, one, it takes some of the sense of just the whole universe dumping on you at once away. And secondly, it opens your heart to have some compassion for others who've been going through this many days before and will continue going through this many days afterwards.
Thank you. Vasantha asks, thank you for organizing this inspiring talk. Is it possible to kindly re-itemize the 5 fears at death, please?
Four. One is fear of being deprived of your human sensual pleasures. The second is fear of losing your human body. The third is fear of punishment after death, and you realize, okay, I've done some unskillful things in this lifetime, and there may be a punishment waiting for me. And then the fourth is the fear that comes from not knowing the true Dharma. You really don't know what's going to happen after death. It's only people who've had their first taste of awakening that know that, that there is something that in the mind that does not die, and that death is not annihilation. So those are the 4 fears.
Thank you. Sumanya asks, what is the best thing a nurse at a hospice can do to help a patient who's dying? We have several hospice people here today.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is really going to depend on the individual. But as you said, the Buddha says the first thing is that you want to make sure the person is not worried. One, worried about the people they're leaving behind. And then secondly, worried about things they may have done in the past that might be, causing them reason to fear what they're going to meet up with after they die. In terms of the people they're leaving behind, reassure the person, okay, you're in a position now where you can't help them either way, no matter if you're worried about them, it's not going to help them. If you're not worried about them, it's not going to help them. It's better for you that you not be worried. So the first thing is to deal with their worries. And then the second thing is to try to get them to think about the good things they've done during their lives. That kind of lifts their minds. Because some of the options that may appear to people as they're dying would be pretty scary things. If you have a range of karma in your lifetime, there's going to be a range of opportunities after you die. And sometimes when people see a bad destination, they think, oh my gosh, I deserve to be punished, and they get sucked into that. Whereas if they can remember the good things they've done, and this doesn't mean the good times they've had, but the good things they've done, that can give them a sense of self-worth and a sense of protection. I really don't deserve to go to someplace bad like that. I've got something good within me. So keep the person soothed to make sure the person is not worried. And then do what you can to lift the person's spirits to remind them that they have some goodness to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajaan. We have another question, if I may ask it on behalf of the person that gave it to us. Are there specific meditations or practices to prepare for our own death?
Everything I just told you in the talk.
Okay.
Okay, there's contemplation of the body so that you're not attached to your body at the moment of death. You can think about, what parts here in the body do you really want to be attached to? Take it apart in your mind. And you realize there's really nothing there. Do you want to hang around your liver? Do you want to hang around your lungs? Do you want to hang around your intestines? No, there's nothing really there worth being attached to. Ajaan Fuang, my teacher, would teach meditation in Bangkok at a funeral monastery. And on Saturday evenings, he would tend not to have too many people come because most people came during the day on Saturdays. And so he'd get out and walk around and stretch his legs. And they had these little pavilions where all the different funerals were being held. And he came back one night and he said, the number of people who die and still hang around their bodies is awfully large. So that's one of the things you want to watch out for. So that a good antidote to that is to do body contemplation. Then I said to overcome fear of losing sensuality, try to develop a good, strong sense of, the pleasure that can come from a concentrated mind. So you're not so attached to your sensuality. Those are the two big things that I would recommend.
Next question. What are the destinations for rebirth?
Oh, there are lots. I mean, the canon talks about sort of the main levels. You have the 6 levels of sensual heavens. There are the many levels of Brahmas. Those are beings who were practicing jhana, and then basically either jhana or practicing the Brahma Viharas, and then go to those levels. There are the pure abodes. These are the ones for non-returners. That's a type of Brahma that's separate from other Brahmas. Those are the higher levels. The lower levels, you start with hungry ghosts, go down to animals, and then the beings in hell. And there are many types of hells, none of which are permanent, but they are bad places to go. And those are just the main levels. There are lots of individual little levels that people can get into that are kind of strange. In fact, the Buddha never described a full sort of map of the whole cosmos because it is just so complex. For example, go ahead.
How does the heavenly realm in Buddhism compare to heaven in Christianity?
I heard a story one time of someone who had a near-death experience. They died on the operating table. And during the time before they were revived, they were taken up to this place. It's kind of like a police precinct station where all the people who just died were being cleared. And they looked in the register and said, "Oh, it's not your time to go yet." And so the person who had led this person into the station said, "Well, before you go back to your body, would you like to see a little bit of heaven?" "Sure, I'd like to see heaven." So he takes him up there. And in the heaven he saw, it was very much like the heaven that you would see in Thai paintings. The celestial beings were dressed in the Thai style. And so he asked his guide, he said, is this only for Buddhists? And he said, "Oh no, we have Christians here, we have Muslims, we have Hindus, we have all kinds of all kinds of religions." He said, "Well, aren't they surprised to see that everybody looks like a Thai deva?" And the guide said, "You see us the way you expect to see us."
Oh, interesting. May I ask another?
Mm-hmm.
What happens between death and rebirth?
This will depend on the individual. Some people go immediately to their next rebirth. Others have a sort of intermediate phase where they're still hanging around this life or the remains of this life, something that they're attached to before they move on. That intermediate phase, it's a kind of rebirth. It's you go from one level of being to another level of being, But some of these levels of being, as I said, are sort of temporary way stations before you move on to something a bit more permanent. And this will depend on the individual's karma. Can I tell you a story?
Yes, please.
I was invited one time to chant at this house. And the story went that this old woman had died, and she started entering people's dreams and said, I can't go yet because I left some money in a box under a tree behind the house. And so they went and dug under the tree, and sure enough, they found the box, and there was money in the box. And so she entered their dreams again. And she said, before I go, I'd like to hear the Mahasamaya Sutta. Now, the Mahasamaya Sutta is one that very few people know how to chant. It's a very long sutta, but it so happens that I learned it. And so they asked her, how are we going to find someone who chants the Mahasamaya Sutta? She mentioned the name of one of my teacher students, and she said, this woman knows a monk who can chant this, so go contact her. So I was contacted. And so I came and I chanted for the spirit. And then I found out later, she entered people's dreams and said, okay, goodbye, thank you. They left. She left.
Thank you. When someone dies, we often feel relief or a release, and then we feel guilty or shame for thinking like that. How do we soothe our minds for that and our hearts?
Okay, well, this is part of the difficulty of human birth, is that we have sometimes very long, painful illnesses before death. And there's a sense of relief that finally, when the illness is over, there should be no sense of guilt. You just remind yourself, okay, the person is passed now, but let's hope that the person is not going to be meeting with any more suffering in the next lifetime. But just remind yourself, okay, there's no need for guilt. And the best way to deal with someone's passing is to say, well, just in case the person could use some extra merit, let's make some merit and dedicate it to them. And that way you're still continuing the relationship.
Thank you. If I spend my whole life practicing and then die a violent death, such as a fire and panic during the pain, does that mean I'll have a bad rebirth? Is it possible to die skillfully amidst a violent death?
The Buddha talks about this with one of his cousins who had just that fear. He was afraid, that sometimes the wild animals come through the town where he was staying, like a white elephant might come rushing down. He might die a sudden violent death. And the Buddha said, if you've been practicing, he says, the mind, it's like a jar that is a jar of oil that has been broken in a pool of water. The oil will rise naturally. So don't be afraid. The other thing that's worth noting is that at the moment of death, when you realize I can't stay in this body any longer, time goes a lot more slowly. That time when I was electrocuted, for me, it felt like 5 minutes. The people who watched it said it was just like a brief split second, because my mind was spinning really fast. I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm going to have to leave this body. Where am I going to go? And because the mind was spinning so fast, things slowed down, and you were able to make a choice. Now, and part of that was my reminding myself, okay, this is what I've been meditating for. Okay, this is the real thing. Get my wits together. And so if you have been meditating, that habit of not just going with whatever thought comes into the mind will really be helpful.
I think you just answered Jonathan's question about, as one is meditating at the time of death, what should the object of meditation be? Does mindfulness of the destination of our rebirth increase the clinging to self?
Okay, the first time, what you want to be doing is taking apart what's happening in terms of form, feelings, perceptions, thought constructs. Just learning to see these as individual events, as I said. And that way, even if you do get reborn, you tend to be reborn in a place where you can continue meditating. Or if it so happens that you actually develop the kind of dispassion that would lead to release, you've done that as well. So don't think about where you want to go. Think about, I've got to take apart the process of what's happening right now and see it. in terms of aggregates or in terms of sense media.
And often we're just hung up on the destination, the
Right.
things. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see, another question. How to differentiate between wanting to meditate and achieve nirvana and being outright lazy and wanting not to work and contribute?
Okay. Nobody went to nirvana from laziness. Let's put it that way. And if you think, okay, well, meditating life would be a lot easier than contributing to society, just try it for a while. It's hard.
Would you please list the 7 strengths again?
Okay, the 7 strengths are conviction, compunction, a sense of shame, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment.
Is passion necessary to meditate?
Yes, you have to be passionate about the path. You really want to do this well. I was reading recently a meditation guide saying that the desire to get things right is going to get in the way of total peace. And I kept saying, no. You want to get the concentration right. After all, it is right view, right resolve, right everything down to right concentration. And you have to learn how to take joy in developing these path factors as skills. Now, there will come a point where you have to let them go, but you can't let them go until they've been developed. And as John Fuang used to say, you want to be crazy about the meditation if you want to do it well.
Should I read one, Fran? We have time for more questions?
Yes, we do.
10 more minutes.
Good. Please restate ways to improve overcoming doubt in the Dharma. Is this developing concentration sufficient to test the Dharmas for oneself? Understanding the nature of craving and how mental identity. I lost the question, Fran. Can you say it?
And how mental identity, fantasies, and attachments happen.
Cool. Okay, well, basically, the way to overcome doubt is to start looking at the qualities of your mind. You remind yourself what the Buddha said. If you act on skillful qualities, lack of greed, lack of aversion, lack of delusion, the results are going to be good. And if you act on unskillful qualities, they're going to be bad. So you test it by trying to develop as many skillful qualities as you can, and abandoning as many unskillful qualities as you can, and see what happens. And as you get some more practice in and begin to see the results of the practice, that's how you overcome your doubt. And then on top of that, one of the skillful qualities the Buddha recommends specifically to, you probably know this, the Sutra to the Kalamas. He recommends developing the Brahma Viharas. And that way, he says, not only develop skillful qualities, but you also, so it's kind of like making a safe bet. If you act on developing thoughts of goodwill, you're not going to be doing nasty things to other people. And then if it turns out that there is rebirth and it is shaped by your karma, okay, you've acted in good ways. If it turns out there's not, then at the very least, you've lived a life free from hostility, free from ill will. You've lived your life as pure. So either way, you come out ahead. Because you have to distinguish there are 2 kinds of doubt. There's the kind of doubt that wants to know and the kind of doubt that doesn't care. And the kind of doubt that doesn't care, that's unskillful. Kind of doubt that wants to know is the one that will be curious and will be willing to test these things.
Question: what can you take with you at death?
You take the qualities of mind that you develop. So you want to develop good ones. It's like packing your suitcase. Make sure you pack good things in the suitcase that will be useful. You don't want to get to your destination, open up, and discover that you packed yesterday's garbage. So develop these 7 strengths. Those will be good things to take with you.
What if I'm dying as a meditator and I am not afraid of death anymore, but the people around me are very sad? And so what can I do to soothe them if I'm the dying person?
Okay, basically tell them, don't worry about me. I'm doing fine.
Is there some way to meditate if you have cancer that can possibly help rid you of cancer? For instance, spreading healing or focusing in a particular way, or spreading goodwill. I have a friend in hospice who could use this help. Thank you.
Okay, well, basically the first thing you've got to worry about is the state of your mind. And so you want to make sure that you're not afraid of dying in the cancer, and work on developing that attitude in your mind. And then if you can, use the good breath energy, like the breath energy meditation that I was teaching just now, that might help. As the Buddha said, there are 3 kinds of illnesses: the illnesses that go away without medicine, the illnesses that will not go away no matter what you do, and then there are the illnesses that go away with medicine, but not without medicine. And it's because of that last category that you treat all illnesses with medicine. So treat the cancer with whatever regimen you want, but also add this healing breath energy as you can, see if that helps. But the important thing is that you don't know ahead of time which kind of cancer you've got. So the best thing is to make sure your mind is in good shape. There is a book called Straight from the Heart. It's available on dhammatalks.org. There's a series of Dharma talks that Ajaan gave to a woman who was dying of cancer. And those are good things to read for anyone who has cancer.
Here's another good question that begs for an answer. How does one stay encouraged if one has meditated for 20 years, yet not experienced any insight?
Just keep telling yourself, I don't know what my past karma is that's keeping things slow, but it's not going to help things if I stop. The only way to test things out is just keep at it, keep at it. Remember that not everybody goes straight to insight or straight to concentration. Sometimes it's going to take a while. If I have the karma that keeps me going slowly, okay, the best way to counteract that karma, of course, is just to keep at it. And take courage from stories of people who meditated for a long time without many results, and then finally things begin to come together. Of course, you might want to ask yourself, am I meditating the right way? Might want to check, see what kind of meditation you're doing. See if you can find one that's more congenial to you, to get the mind at least to settle down. There's a question I just saw just flash across the screen saying the name of the book by Ajaan. It's Straight from the Heart. Yeah. Go ahead.
Fran, you have another one, Fran?
Yes, I do. When I am close to death after a long illness, I feel the burden is off and start to long for a better rebirth. Is this a skillful mindset?
Well, it's better than thinking horrible things about how much you don't want to die. But just say, I've got the opportunity right now, whatever state my body is in, I could try to understand my mind's relationship to pain. So I don't have to be in too great of a hurry. Take the opportunity of what I have right now. Just try to be as in the present moment as much as you can to understand how the mind is relating to pain. That would be the topic for a whole nother talk.
You. We'll go with just kind of a combination question. People are asking about mind consciousness and nirvanic consciousness, and then consciousness without surface.
Mhm.
What consciousness is there that might not pass on?
Okay, the mind consciousness that goes with the six senses, that does not pass on. That's something that's related to the six senses of this particular body. You pick up another body, and there will be another mind consciousness that goes with that set of six senses. Consciousness without surface is the consciousness that is experienced in nirvana, and that doesn't pass on. That doesn't go anywhere at all. That's totally outside of space and time.
We have a question. Is there any evidence we can find to confirm Buddhist teachings? Is there somewhere we can get to where we can be sure that we were on the right path?
Okay, when you have your first taste of awakening, you know that what the Buddha taught was really true. It had nothing to do with culture, and it had nothing to do with just somebody back in India 2,600 years ago, but it's something that is universal. Up to that point, you have to go on conviction. The Buddha himself gives an image. He says it's like looking for a bull elephant in the forest. You see these big footprints, and it looks likely, but you also know that there are dwarf females with big feet. They're not the big bull elephant that you want to do the work. So it looks likely, but you're not sure, but you follow. And then you find scratch marks up in the trees. And the scratch marks could have been made by a big bull elephant, but they could also have been made by tall females with tusks. So you're not fully 100% sure yet, but then you keep following the tracks, and then you find the big bull elephant standing in a clearing. That's when you know, okay, you've got your big bull elephant. In the same way, he said, but the footmarks are like the states of jhana that you gain. Footprints, the scratch marks are like the psychic powers you can gain. Even those don't count as proof of the Buddhist teachings. It's that first taste of awakening, what they call the arising of the Dharma eye. That's when you know for sure the Buddha was right. There is a deathless element outside of space and time, and it can be attained through human effort. We have time for one more question.
That last chance.
I have 3-4 questions just popping in right now. Let's see. I've been having extended periods of time, days, having an experience of feeling like I've never been born. No childhoods, no raising. It is an empty experience, yet completely full. What would the Buddha understand of this experience?
He would say, watch it for a while, see what happens to it. See how it develops.
If nirvana is glimpsed, how is it then lost?
Because you get excited about the glimpse and you go back into your old pattern of fabricating about things. Okay, well, thank you for your attention. Hope this has been helpful.
This has been wonderful, Ajaan. We're so happy that you could join us tonight. Want to thank all of the people who came from all over, and we welcome your attention, and come and visit our monastery when you have an opportunity. Also, come into our other talks series, and hopefully we will have Ajaan back soon and cover another important topic to help us along the way. This is invaluable.
Okay.
Thank you all
Thank you.
very much.
Okay, everybody be well.